Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to paint a lonely wolf in my favorite double exposure style. I start by weighting the sky area with clear brush, trying not to get too close to the outline because I need to keep the shape of my animal nice and clean. I apply a liberal amount of water all around the moon and all the way to the border with the mountain. In this case, the paint won't drip down. Then I take my wet brush and get some turquoise and run a few strokes across the sky, imitating the clouds. The sky near the horizon line is usually the lightest, so I start painting near the sharp border with the mountain, bringing the color up to the sky. Going from light to dark, I'm adding more turquoise and phthalo blue, making sure that I stay within my silhouette. I'm also playing with a few zigzag shapes to mimic cloudy sky. When you paint around the moon, be extra careful not to get your dark colors there. If somehow you've got the moon covered in paint, rinse and dry your brush on paper towel, then wipe the color off the moon. You can also use a dry clean paper towel to soak up the paint. Once you apply your lightest colors, it's the time to build up the darkness. For this step, I take Payne's gray and start my brush strokes from the dry area right on my silhouette line, moving down to the wet area. I switch between thick and thin brush strokes to add the variety and movement to the painting. I'm painting more slowly near the outline to make sure they stay within the borders, but inside the animal I'm painting freely. Adding more and more dark strokes of blue and violet around the moon, I move down to the ear and neck of the wolf. For the deepest accents, I'm adding a mix of violet, blue and Payne's gray. My hand movements not only follow the direction of a cloudy sky, but also the fur of the wolf. Building up the darkness, I'm also adding some fun splashes of blue to imitate the night sky. This is the most magical technique because you just let the colors flow, you only gently help the pigments to combine and then watch how beautifully they dry, creating unique texture. Important note is that you can still add more color and detail while the paper is still wet. When it's dry, it will be almost impossible to fix, but you're still able to add more later with extra layers. When surface is still damp, you can sprinkle some salt and see how it affects the paint around. This will help to create a very interesting starry sky. Next we move to painting a mountain and a base of our forest. My paper is dry here and with a dark mix of violet and blue, I paint the base. I start with the very tip of my brush for a pointy peak, but then I'm moving down, pressing on my brush harder and painting with the side. As I go, I'm adding lighter tones of color with turquoise for a contrasting effect with the forest. Then I move from the peaks to the left side and letting a part of the mountain to blend with the still damp sky. This will dry very beautifully, and I let my watercolor to take its own shape. Remember that you're not trying just to simply copy a reference image, but filling the wolf with its own story inside. It shouldn't be perfect. The feelings that art evokes are more important. I'm moving down to the bottom part of the painting, adding more loose and larger strokes of lighter blue turquoise mix. You can see how I switch from almost flat brush movement to fill in the area to a pointy, precise strokes to paint the hair of my wolf. Then I'm adding darker violet tones with Payne's gray and smoothly blend them with the blue mountain background. This is the base of our foreground trees. While the area is still wet, I start painting the trees with almost the tip of my brush to define them. Again, don't try to paint them too perfect, we're just adding darker color to deepen our composition. I move to the very bottom, marking the road and working around my silhouette lines. The front will be pretty dark, so I'm using a mix of Payne's gray with blue and violet. With very loose dark strokes, I build up the bushy tail, switching to pointy short strokes when painting the hairs. If my paper is dry, my lines are solid and precise. If the surface is still wet, my tiny lines blend in, creating more volume. The middle part of the artwork is still damp, so when I add more Payne's gray, it blends smoothly. I go over the sides of my forest and the road. Soon we'll be painting our trees, so we need to make sure that the top half of the artwork is dry. Otherwise, our tree tops will blend with the sky. If your surface is still slightly wet, you can wait a bit to let it dry, or use a hair dryer to speed up the process. My sky is dry now and it's safe to cover the moon with a very light shade of turquoise. I paint the bottom part with a round movement and blend it with the top using a clean dry brush. Now we are ready to move to our trees. I mix a dark wash of violet and blue with a bit of Payne's gray. I start with my tallest tree, painting it with the very tip of my brush in uneven, short brush strokes. In nature, trees are not symmetrical, so please don't think too much about painting a perfect one, but rather let yourself and your hand to create some magic. If you need some references for the pine trees, look up the images on the internet. When I move down the tree, I press on my brush harder and you can see that my strokes are becoming larger as well. Sometimes I hold my brush almost vertically at the top of my handle. This allows me to paint branches and leaves freely in an almost fluid way. Painting more and more branches, I make sure that they also imitate the fur of my wolf. It's crucial while painting my double exposure artwork to always remember that it's a portrait first, and with the landscape inside, I'm just adding more meaning to my art. I continue to paint trees with a slightly different mix of my blue, violet and Payne's gray. There's a part of a mountain background that is still not dry, and some of my trees blend with it. This is actually helping us to create a deeper perspective. Again and again, I'm painting a tree starting from the top, using the very tip of my brush, and then moving down and pressing harder. I'm trying to create a circular composition, more like a swirl going counterclockwise from the bottom left side of the forest up to the moon. This will guide the eyes of the viewer all over the artwork. It's also better when the objects, in our case the trees, are all different sizes and levels. This way we will have a very fresh and organic feel to our artwork. For the front tree, I'm using clean Payne's gray for the darkest accent. My underpainting here is dry, so my strokes of branches look just like fur. Then I'm using the same color to paint hairlines in other areas as well. At the bottom of the tail, I paint close-up branches in the same darkest mix. This method helps our eyes to determine the perspective. Largest and most contrasting objects at the front, smaller and lighter objects at the back. To create volume around a bush on the right side of the tail, I paint a darker background. Sometimes I like to add colors straight from my palette so they would blend nicely on the paper by themselves. I do that here with violet and then smooth it over with clean, almost dry brush. I do the same on the left, then using a lighter mix of blue and gray, I paint a few hairlines, then start working on the background trees in the middle to create an effect of a deep forest. You can notice that every tree is different. I try not to think about the precise strokes and branches and just keep the shape of the pine tree in my mind while doing that. Again, if I need more control over my brush and movement, I hold it close to the bristles. When I need more loose and free strokes, I move up the handle. Most of my painted layers are dry now, and I start adding more details and fur. I need to retouch large trees on the right. Previously that area was still pretty damp, so the tree blended with the sky a bit. I'm not going over the whole tree, just adding contrasting notes to the tops. I add some fun splashes in the blue mix around my wolf. For this technique I get quite a lot of water on my brush and just go with my finger through the bristles. You can also tap the brush with color on the other brush, but that seems to create more out of a hand splashes that you can't control. Sometimes I like to paint other animals or birds inside my wildlife artwork, and here I'm adding a couple of birds flying over the forest. These characters can help to add more meaning to your story. With a clean brush, I get some white to sprinkle over the darkest areas in the sky and paint a few larger stars as well. We are almost at the very end. These are our final touches. Using blue Payne's gray mix, I'm adding bigger strokes of hair starting with the tail. When I do that, my brush doesn't have much water in it, which helps me to paint straight solid lines. Then I move all over my wolf. I never just simply outline my portraits, which would create a childish or cartoonish look. Having a real wolf reference image in the same position would help a lot to feel more comfortable. This is it, our beautiful wolf is done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and have fun creating your own lonely wolf.